Thank you for being here again. Truly. My name is George, and I'm happy to share this space with you and to begin this new phase of the channel. For me, this has become something else. More conscious, more intentional. I'm grateful to be able to do this with you. And I'm really counting on your presence, your stories, your reflections, everything each of you has to share. A lot of people here resonate with this idea of being chosen. It's not a title, it's not a label. It's more like a way of describing certain things we experience on the inside, like feeling that something has changed within you, even though everything on the outside looks the same. Maybe you've gone through something like this. That quiet feeling of displacement, the sense that the world that once made sense now doesn't quite fit. It's not an exaggeration. It's not just tiredness. It's a true shift in perception. Some people call it an inner calling. It doesn't come with noise or a knock on the door. It comes with sensations, a discomfort that doesn't go away, the search for more coherence, the need to align your life with what your soul is actually able to sustain. When we talk about the chosen, we're talking about those people who don't want a spotlight, fame, or likes. They want truth. They're people who start letting go of what no longer speaks to who they're becoming, even if it hurts, even if it requires hard choices, internal shifts, or reevaluating everything. But here's something a lot of people don't realize. February has already chosen you, and it's going to impact you more than you think. This is the kind of month that catches people by surprise, not with problems, but with turning points. The kind of change that seems small at first, but then suddenly transforms everything around it. Most people enter February half asleep, thinking nothing important will happen this month. But believe me, this year is different. January didn't block you. It cleared the way for you. Everything that felt slow, frustrating, heavy, or out of place wasn't failure. It was a month that removed the dead weight you couldn't carry into your next phase. Loose ends being tied, wrong directions coming to a stop, energy drains and exhausting situations coming to an end. January wasn't a setback. It was a cleansing. And now February arrives like the wave after the storm. This is the month when life finally starts placing the right things in your hands. Because February doesn't give back what was lost. It replaces it with what was meant to be yours. There's a reason February already feels unusual, even if nothing in your physical life has changed yet. Some months announce themselves through events, progress, messages, or opportunities. But this month announces itself inside you first. It shows up as that strange, almost uncomfortable feeling of anticipation. The feeling that something is happening, even though your life still looks exactly the same on the outside. Most people don't notice it, but internal confirmation always comes before external evidence. Your mind senses alignment long before your circumstances change. That's why so many people describe February as a month that feels charged, with energy, intensity, or difference, even if they can't explain why. This month follows a quiet rule. Your body feels the transformation before your eyes see it. February brings what I call a pre-event frequency, the sense that something in your life is about to click into place. Your life changes on the inside, long before it changes on the outside. That's why some people feel restless. Others feel strangely calm. And some feel like they're standing on the edge of a chapter they still can't see. Have you noticed that recently? Some people have started paying more attention to you. It's not a direct compliment. It's not an invitation. Sometimes it's not even a clear question. It's that strange, subtle interest. People wanting to know about your life, what you do, what you think, how you got to where you are. I've gone through this more than once. People who were never close suddenly watching more closely. Others trying to start conversations without really knowing why. And even those who simply pull away, change their tone, become colder, as if something in them had been triggered. And it wasn't because I was trying to get attention. On the contrary, I've always been discreet. But it seemed like the way I lived, the choices I made, the way I reacted to things, all of that drew attention without me asking for it. When a lot of people talk about being chosen, this is what they mean. Not someone special or superior, but someone who ends up being noticed because they don't play certain games, don't repeat certain patterns, and don't live on autopilot. In my case, it showed up in simple phrases. You don't think like everyone else. You're quieter than you seem. Why don't you do things like others do? And sometimes, it didn't even come in words. It came in silence, in comparison, in a poorly disguised curiosity. The Bible talks about people who are called to live differently, not as a privilege, but as a responsibility. In Romans 8:29, the idea isn't about being set apart to be admired, but about being aligned. It's about living in a way that sooner or later becomes visible. And when that visibility comes, so do the reactions. Some draw closer, others get uncomfortable, some try to understand, others prefer to walk away. Being seen as chosen isn't comfortable. It means being watched, questioned, and often tested, not because you've done anything wrong, but because the way you live reveals what many people haven't yet dealt with within themselves. If that sounds familiar, then this conversation is exactly about that. Why some people attract attention without trying, stir up contradictory reactions, and end up being seen as different, even when all they're trying to do is live with integrity. If this kind of reflection resonates with you, stay, subscribe to the channel, and join in. This space exists to talk about these experiences, without exaggeration, without labels, and without spectacle. That kind of attention from people around you usually starts subtly. I've experienced it at different stages. At work, for example, when I started turning down certain conversations, stopped engaging in empty comments or quiet power plays, some colleagues began treating me differently. They asked fewer questions to my face and more behind my back. They tried to figure out why I no longer reacted the way I used to. At other times, it showed up in my family. Small changes, being more silent, avoiding conflict, leaving gatherings earlier, were enough to spark comments. You're acting strange. You've changed. You used to be different. Not out of genuine concern, but as an attempt to pull back someone who no longer fit where they once did. This kind of interest often comes with comparison. People watch how you handle hardship, how you navigate loss, how you react when something goes wrong. Some want to understand how you're holding it together. Others are uncomfortable that you didn't break where they did. When you step away from certain environments, it doesn't go unnoticed. Your absence becomes a topic of conversation. Someone asks about you to someone else. They try to figure out if you're okay, if you fell, if you changed your mind. Not out of genuine care, but because your departure disrupted the previous dynamic. That's often when people start using the word chosen to describe this kind of path. Not as something mystical, but as a way to name people who end up walking outside the common flow, who don't take every shortcut available, who choose to give up space in certain places to preserve their own integrity. You begin to notice who sticks around out of respect, and who disappears when they no longer have access to your attention, your time, or your emotional energy. This isn't a judgment born of suspicion. It's insight born of experience. And it changes the way you choose your steps, your connections, and the environments where you choose to stay. And February has its own way of reorganizing your social world, quietly. There are no dramatic consequences, no confrontations, no major lessons. Instead, it uses subtle changes, uneven effort, shifting priorities, conversations that fade, to separate the people meant for your next chapter from those who only belonged in the last one. This is where the concept of social gravity comes in. Every person in your life pulls you in a direction. Some lift you higher, others pull you down. Some move you forward, others keep you orbiting the same problems. February redefines that gravitational field. Suddenly, the presence of certain people starts to feel heavier, while the presence of others feels refreshingly light. You might find yourself craving deeper conversations and losing interest in the superficial ones. Maybe you felt this slowly, without being able to name a specific moment. People who used to approach you naturally began acting differently. Some became more curious, others more distant. Conversations that once flowed started to get shorter. Certain invitations stopped coming. And at the same time, strange, indirect questions began to surface, as if people were trying to figure out what had changed in you, even though you hadn't announced any change at all. That's how it happened with me. There was no falling out, no argument, no dramatic decision. I just started pulling back more, choosing more carefully where to place my energy, and explaining my decisions less. And that alone was enough to change the way some people saw me. People who once seemed comfortable around me began to show discomfort, as if my quieter posture had broken some invisible agreement that used to exist. The strangest part, I wasn't trying to distance myself from anyone. I just stopped being available all the time. I stopped carrying problems that weren't mine. Stop joining conversations that always ended the same way. Stop sustaining relationships that existed only because of my constant presence. And when you do that, something becomes very clear. Many people don't miss you as a person. They miss the role you played in their lives. That's when a lot of people start using the word chosen to describe this kind of process. Not as some grand spiritual label, but as a way to name people who, when they begin to change internally, naturally stir discomfort around them. Because real change doesn't come with a speech. It's not flashy. It shows up in how you respond, what you accept, what you no longer tolerate. And that shakes people who are used to your predictability. I felt guilty about it. There were many moments when I wondered if I was being too harsh, too distant, too cold. There were days when I thought about going back, about being who I used to be, because loneliness can weigh heavily. But every time I tried to ignore what was happening inside me, my body responded. Fatigue, irritability, a deep sense that I was betraying myself just to keep everything the same. Maybe that's what's happening with you right now. Maybe you're feeling more sensitive, more selective, less willing to explain yourself, losing some people, and at the same time, gaining clarity about who you are. February has a subtle way of showing you that you've evolved, without ever consciously trying to. It's not one of those loud, dramatic, identity-shifting moments that people romanticize. It's quieter, purer, far more real. You just start behaving differently, and it catches you off guard, because nothing in your environment has changed. But somehow you have. It shows up in the smallest interactions. Someone says something that used to trigger you, and instead of spiraling, you simply don't care. A situation that once would have sent you into overthinking now barely registers. Patterns you used to follow suddenly seem boring. You catch yourself valuing your work without needing to make a big deal about it. Because it's not about performance anymore. It's about alignment. This is identity drift in its highest form. It's not reinvention. It's refinement. It's the moment you realize that the person who entered February is not the same one living it. And that becomes obvious the moment something that used to drain you no longer has any weight. That moment when you find yourself thinking, wait, this doesn't bother me anymore. And February amplifies that shift. It becomes a period of personality refinement, softening behaviors that used to exhaust you and strengthening the ones that make you more resilient. You start responding from your future self instead of your past self. And that change alone can completely shift the course of your year. The more February progresses, the more you realize you're untangling yourself from patterns you didn't even know you'd outgrown. And that connects directly to something even more powerful. There was a time in my life when things started growing quieter, without me planning it. I didn't wake up one day and decide to pull away. Things just started to shift, little by little, almost without warning. Invitations that once seemed normal started to feel exhausting just to think about. Conversations I'd heard 100 times began to feel hollow. I'd come home feeling like I had spent way too much energy just to stay in the same place. In my daily life, it showed up in simple ways. At work, I began avoiding meetings that always ended in complaints and never solved anything. I started doing what was my responsibility, and nothing beyond that. At home, I started to prefer silence after a long day, rather than explaining myself or stepping into arguments I already knew the outcome of. Some people noticed quickly. Casual comments started popping up, indirect questions, jokes that masked discomfort. You've been distant. You've changed. You used to be more present. I heard all of that without really knowing how to respond, because I didn't have a clear explanation myself. I just knew I needed that space. There was a family lunch that marked this for me. Everyone was talking at once, the same topics as always, the same complaints. I stayed quiet, eating, observing. I did nothing more than that. And yet afterwards, someone said I seemed distant, different, strange. That moment showed me how sometimes just stepping out of an expected role is enough to make people uncomfortable. Over time, I started to realize that some relationships were built far more on my constant presence than on any real exchange. As long as I was available, listening, keeping the atmosphere together, everything was fine. But when that presence began to fade, so did the connection. There wasn't a fight, just distance. Something similar happened at work. When I started saying, "I can't take this on right now," or simply clocking out and going home, some people reacted immediately. Less conversation, less closeness, more space. Nothing explicit, but definitely noticeable. Those experiences taught me more than any theory ever could. They showed me how small shifts in your posture reveal so much. They reveal who respects your boundaries, who gets uncomfortable when you stop being predictable, who was truly walking alongside you, and who was simply filling a space while it was convenient. Loneliness showed up at times, especially in the beginning. There were days I came home with the heavy feeling that I was losing important people. Other days, doubt crept in. Am I being too cold? Too distant? Too harsh? But every time I tried to go back to how I used to be, something in me resisted. My body felt more tired. My mind became unsettled. Now, looking back, I see that silence made space for more genuine relationships. Fewer, but more honest. People who aren't bothered by my pace, my boundaries, or my moments of solitude. Not everyone stayed, but the ones who did truly stayed. February elevates your standards in a way that feels almost effortless. Not because you're angry, hurt, or bitter, but because the clarity you've gained in recent weeks no longer allows you to accept what you once tolerated. You don't need to force boundaries or convince yourself that you deserve better. Your system already knows that, and your choices naturally begin to reflect it. you'll notice yourself valuing your time more. Not in a rigid or defensive way, but in a way that feels pure and instinctive. You stop wasting energy on uncertainty. You stop giving attention to people who drain you. You stop explaining yourself to people who never cared to understand you. Your standards rise quietly. And yet that subtle shift impacts every aspect of your life. This isn't about cutting everyone off. It's about re-evaluating your worth. You're no longer acting out of insecurity. You're acting out of recognition. Recognition of what you offer, what you deserve, and what truly contributes to your growth. February aligns your expectations with your identity. That's why so many interactions start to feel different. Some people suddenly seem lighter, more enjoyable. Others feel heavier than before, because your standards are filtering out anything that no longer resonates with your heart. And one of the most powerful things about months like this is that you don't raise your standards by force. Life raises them for you. You simply realize that taking a step backward is no longer an option. And that happens because something inside you is finally refusing to shrink, to fit into spaces that never matched your potential. When your standards rise, your life rises too. February is the month when your worth outweighs your excuses. That's why it becomes a turning point for so many people, without them even realizing it. Because when your standards shift, your choices shift. When your choices shift, your path shifts. And when your path shifts, your entire year can transform from the clarity of a single month. And February is the month when that accumulation reaches a tipping point. Think of how a ball doesn't bounce the moment it touches the ground. First, it presses down, absorbs the impact, drops lower before it rises. That's what the past few months have been for you. You haven't fallen behind. You've been building the tension needed for a stronger rebound. And February is the month of rebound, of rising, of return. Maybe this season is asking something different of you. More care, careful attention to what's heavy, what drains you, what begins to create inner chaos even when, on the outside, everything seems normal. Many people who resonate with the idea of being chosen go through phases like this, where sensitivity increases and the body responds more clearly to environments, conversations, and people. This is a time that invites you to pull inward, to embrace stillness and observation, a slower pace, a more thoughtful eye on who's coming close, and the effect certain relationships have on your internal state. Some people will react to your absence, to your silence, to the fact that you're no longer as available. When access changes, discomfort shows up. One of the biggest signs that February is a good month for you isn't a sudden wave of excitement or motivation. It's relief. Most people overlook relief because it doesn't feel like a major breakthrough. But in truth, it's the first sign that everything has already begun to shift. It's your body recognizing that something heavy has loosened its grip. You go about your day and realize you're no longer carrying that weight in your chest. That mental overload has started to fade. Things that once felt complicated are now manageable again. And February brings an energetic stability that makes your whole system exhale, as if it finally got permission to stop holding tension. You don't have to force optimism. You don't have to hype yourself up. This month naturally brings you into a more emotionally balanced state. It's a silent but powerful recalibration. Relief isn't the end of the storm. It's the moment your spirit realizes you already made it through. When relief arrives first, it means February is preparing the ground for a month where life stops resisting you. The pressure eases, the noise fades, and for the first time in a long while, you feel like something is actually supporting you. February carries a very specific emotional tone, not because miracles fall from the sky, but because the obstacles that were blocking you begin to dissolve. Progress no longer feels forced. Decisions don't feel so heavy. Paths that once seemed impossible suddenly open, with a lightness that makes you wonder why they were ever so hard. It's not luck. It's not coincidence. It's alignment finally catching up to you. And when the energy stops pushing against you, you naturally begin to move forward without burning out. That's the quality of February. There's something about this month that feels like the universe finally got out of your way. And because of that, everything begins to fall into place. That's why February carries such a comforting energy. It reflects your readiness. You're not starting from zero this month. You're starting from everything January cleared from your path, from everything December taught you, from everything last year shaped within you. February isn't here to test you. It's here to support you. And no matter what happens, hold on to that. There is so much more working in your favor now than you realize. Hope is not a guess this month. It's a signal. And it's already leading you toward what's next. If you feel like it, you're welcome to share your story. You can write it in the comments, or if you prefer something more private, use the email in the video description. This space exists to listen, to welcome, and to walk with you. From now on, the stories that reach me will also begin to be shared in future videos. Real stories, lived stories, treated with care, respect, and confidentiality. Stories that may help others recognize themselves and feel less alone. This season speaks deeply about new beginnings, about tending to what was wounded, reorganizing what was knocked out of place, and moving forward with more awareness. And I'm genuinely grateful that you're here again, sharing this moment, this phase, this process. If any part of this made sense to you, even just a little, that's already enough. You don't need to understand everything right now. Just start observing your days, what drains you, what gives you peace. Sometimes, just paying attention changes everything. And remember, when you live with more truth, your presence naturally stands out. Take care of yourself. Protect your peace. Forgive when you can. Keep your feet on the ground. Thank you for being here.